Under the silver glow of the moon, where shadows stretch long and the air hums with ancient secrets, there's a story waiting to be told, one that begins with a lone traveler and a choice that could reshape the very fabric of Middle-earth. Can you feel it? The whisper of the wind, carrying fragments of a forgotten prophecy, the weight of destiny pressing against the silence of the night. This is where our journey begins, not just as listeners, but as witnesses to something extraordinary. And before we dive deeper, we'd love to know, where are you joining us from tonight? What hour has found you, curled beneath blankets or drifting toward dreams? Let us know in the comments below, because your presence here, in this moment, feels like part of the magic itself. Picture this, a man named Eldrin, his cloak dusted with the wear of countless roads, kneeling before a stone older than kingdoms. His fingers trace runes that pulse with a faint, eerie light, as if the earth itself is speaking to him. The words etched there are more than markings, they are a summons, a call to awaken something long dormant. But here's the truth that chills him. This isn't just his story. It's yours too, because every one of us has stood at a crossroads, heart pounding, torn between the safety of what we know and the terrifying thrill of what we're meant to become. Eldrin's choice isn't just about fate or duty. It's about the courage to step into the unknown, and that's a feeling as old as time. So tonight, let's wander together into the heart of Middle-earth, where legends aren't just tales but living breaths in the dark. This is more than a bedtime story. It's an invitation to lose yourself in a world where every rustle of leaves might be a sign, where the stars themselves seem to lean closer to listen. As Eldrin grapples with the weight of his lineage, we'll explore what it means to awaken, not just as a hero, but as someone who dares to answer when destiny calls. The road ahead is woven with mystery, danger, and moments so vivid, you'll forget where the story ends and your own imagination begins. So settle in, dear traveler. The whispers are growing louder, and the night is full of possibilities. The moment Eldrin's boot touches the hidden path, the world around him shifts, not in sight, but in feeling. The air grows thicker, laden with the scent of damp earth and something older, something that hums beneath the soil like a buried chord. Trees bend their branches inward, not to block him, but as if urging him forward. Every step crunches on leaves that whisper secrets in a language just beyond his grasp. This isn't merely a trail through the woods. It's a threshold, a place where time thins and the past presses close enough to touch. His grandfather's voice echoes in his memory, recounting the sleeping kings with reverence. Men of such valor, the old man would say, that even the earth refused to claim them. They were said to rest beneath the ruins of Arnor, their swords still clasped in hands that never decayed, their dreams woven into the roots of the land itself. But legends, Eldrin knows, are rarely kind to those who seek them. For every tale of glory, there's a warning, of traps laid by forgotten magic, of guardians who neither sleep nor forgive. And then there are the whispers of the shadow, the nameless things that hunger for the light of men. A twig snaps somewhere to his left, too sharp to be the wind. Eldrin freezes, his pulse a drumbeat in his throat. The forest holds its breath. Was that a fox, a stray branch, or something with eyes that gleam in the dark? Something that's been waiting for a fool brave enough to walk this path alone. He exhales slowly, fingers brushing the hilt of his dagger. Courage isn't the absence of fear, his grandfather once told him. It's the choice to keep walking when every instinct screams to turn back. And so he does. The ruins loom ahead, their broken arches like ribs of a long-dead giant. Moonlight spills through the cracks, painting the stones in silver and shadow. Somewhere in that labyrinth of crumbled glory, the sleeping kings wait. But between Eldrin and them lies the weight of centuries, and the creeping dread that he isn't the only one searching. The wind carries a new sound now, faint but unmistakable, the scrape of metal on stone. Someone, or something, is already here. The shadows deepen as twilight fades to full night, and Eldrin feels the weight of unseen eyes upon him, not just from the ruins ahead, but from the trees themselves. Then, without warning, the air shivers. A figure materializes from the gloom, as if stepping through a curtain of mist. Cloaked in tattered gray, with a staff gnarled by time, the stranger stands unnervingly still. His face is hidden beneath a hood, but Eldrin catches the glint of eyes like smoldering embers. "You walk a path few dare to tread," the man says, his voice rough yet oddly melodic, like wind through canyon stones. He introduces himself as Thalian, a wanderer who's seen the bones of this land shift over centuries. There's no warmth in his greeting, only a quiet intensity that makes Eldrin's skin prickle. Yet something in the way Thalian's gaze lingers on the ruins suggests he's no ordinary traveler. He speaks of Arnor not as a myth, but as a place he's walked, a place where the stones still remember the tread of kings. Eldrin's instincts war within him. Trust is a currency he's learned to spend carefully, especially here, where even moonlight feels like a conspirator. But Thalian's knowledge is too precise to dismiss. He describes the layout of the ruins down to the carving of a forgotten sigil above the eastern gate, a detail Eldrin's grandfather once sketched in the margins of his journal. The way is treacherous, Thalian murmurs, but not impossible, not for one who carries the mark. His staff tilts toward Eldrin's left wrist, where a birthmark curls like a crescent moon. The same mark, Eldrin realizes with a jolt, that adorned the shields of Arnor's royal guard. A gust of wind howls through the trees, and Thalian's expression darkens. "They've sensed you," he says abruptly. "The Shadow Watchers." He doesn't elaborate, but the name alone sends a chill down Eldrin's spine. "They're the reason," Thalian explains, "why so few who seek the sleeping kings ever return. Not quite alive, not quite dead, they drift through the ruins like smoke, drawn to the warmth of living breath. Some say they were once men who swore oaths too terrible to break. Others claim they're fragments of a darker will, left behind when the shadow fell." Thalian offers his guidance, but his terms are cryptic. Follow, but question nothing. Speak only when spoken to, and if the Watchers come, run. It's not the reassurance Eldrin hoped for, but as the first distant screech pierces the night, a sound like rusted metal grinding against bone. He knows hesitation is a luxury he can't afford. The wanderer steps forward, his cloak blending with the mist, and Eldrin follows, one hand on his dagger, the other clutching the one truth that keeps his feet moving. Some choices aren't made in daylight, but in the dark, where fear and purpose share the same hungry breath. The deeper they travel into the ruins, the heavier the air becomes, not with mist, but with something far more unsettling. It clings to Eldrin's skin like cold fingers, each breath laced with the scent of damp stone and something metallic, like old blood. The trees here are twisted, their branches curled into unnatural shapes, as if frozen mid-reach, and then come the whispers. At first, they're faint, blending with the rustle of leaves, but soon they sharpen into words just beyond understanding, slipping into Eldrin's ears like smoke. He catches movement at the edges of his vision, shadows that flicker too quickly to be real, then vanish. But when he turns, there's nothing, only the unsettling certainty that something is pacing them, just out of sight. Thalian doesn't react, his stride steady, but his grip on his staff tightens. They are here, he murmurs, so low Eldrin almost misses it. The Shadow Watchers. They don't walk the earth like you or I. They drift between moments, waiting for weakness. Eldrin's pulse quickens as a figure materializes ahead, tall and gaunt, its form shifting like ink in water. No face, no features, just a silhouette that drinks in the moonlight. Then another appears to his left, another to his right. They don't advance, don't speak. They simply watch. Thalian's voice cuts through the silence, sharp as a blade. Don't meet their gaze, don't acknowledge them. They feed on fear, on hesitation. To them, doubt is an open door, but ignoring them is harder than it sounds. The whispers grow louder, threading through Eldrin's thoughts like vines. Fragments of memories. His grandfather's funeral, the day he left home. Every failure he's ever carried rise unbidden, each one dripping with a bitterness that doesn't feel entirely his own. The Watchers are testing him, Thalian explains, not with claws or teeth, but with the weight of his own past. The path to the sleeping kings isn't guarded by swords or spells, the Wanderer says. It's barred by the things we refuse to face. Eldrin stumbles, his boot catching on a root. Or was it a hand? The ground seems to writhe beneath him, the very earth alive with murmured regrets. A Watcher drifts closer, its presence like a winter draft down his spine. Run, his instincts scream, but Thalian's warning echoes louder. Run, and you're lost. The Watchers don't chase, they claim, so Eldrin does the only thing he can. He walks forward, not blindly, not without fear, but through it, one step, then another, each one heavier than the last. The Watchers press closer, their whispers now deafening, a chorus of every doubt he's ever buried. And then, just as the pressure threatens to crush him, the air shivers. The Watchers recoil, their forms rippling like disturbed water. A sound like shattering glass fractures the night, and suddenly, the path ahead is clear. Thalian exhales, the first sign of relief he's shown. They'll return, he says, but you've passed their test. For now, the unspoken truth hangs between them. The deeper they go, the sharper the tests will become. Because the Watchers aren't just guardians. They're the land itself, and it remembers the price of awakening kings. The great door looms before them, its surface worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain, yet the faces carved into the stone remain eerily vivid. Kings with hollow eyes and mouths, frozen in silent cries. Eldrin's breath catches as he steps closer, the weight of their gazes pressing against his skin. Thalian's voice is barely a whisper now, as if the ruins themselves might be listening. The trial of the ancients, he says. They will not test your strength, nor your skill with a blade. They will test the weight of your heart. Eldrin hesitates, his fingers hovering just above the stone. What does it mean to be true of heart? The question lingers unanswered as Thalian takes a measured step back, his expression unreadable. There's no ceremony, No grand incantation, just the quiet understanding that this moment belongs to Eldrin alone. With a slow exhale, he presses his palm against the door. The world dissolves. Suddenly, he's not standing in ruins but knee-deep in mud and blood, the air thick with the screams of men and the clash of steel. Armored figures surge around him, their banners tattered, the silver tree of Arnor snapping in a gale. He knows these faces, though he's never seen them before. His ancestors, their fear is his fear, their resolve his own. A blade swings toward him, and instinctively he raises an arm, but the weapon passes through him like mist. This isn't just a vision, it's a memory, not his, but theirs. One scene bleeds into another, a king kneeling in the wreckage of his throne room, clasping the hand of a dying soldier. A mother hiding her child beneath the roots of a great oak, as fire consumes the village behind her. A lone rider charging into a storm of arrows, his cry lost to the wind. Each moment is a fragment of courage, of sacrifice, of love and loss, woven into the bones of this land. And with each one, Eldrin feels something inside him splinter and reform, as if the visions are etching their truths into his very soul. Then comes the silence. The battlefields fade, replaced by a darkness so complete it feels like falling. A voice, ancient and resonant, speaks not to his ears, but to his bones. Why do you seek the sleeping kings? The question isn't spoken in words, but in sensations, the ache of a scar, the warmth of a hearth, the sting of betrayal. Eldrin's answer comes unbidden, raw and unguarded, because I must, not for glory, not for power, but because something deeper than duty calls him. The darkness shatters. The door groans as it splits down the middle, the carved faces parting like mourners at a funeral. Beyond it, a cavern stretches into the earth, its walls lined with ghostly blue flames that cast no heat, only a light that seems to pulse in time with Eldrin's heartbeat. Thalian's hand grips his shoulder, steadying him as the last of the visions bleed away. The ancients have judged you, he murmurs, and now the true trial begins. The air inside the cavern smells of damp stone and something older, iron, perhaps, or the faint tang of lightning after a storm. The blue flames flicker as if stirred by unseen breath, their light glinting off something metallic in the shadows ahead. Swords, dozens of them, embedded in the ground like markers in a graveyard. But these are no ordinary blades. Their hilts are wrapped in threadbare cloth, their edges unrusted despite the centuries. Thalian's gaze darkens as he steps forward. The oath bound, he says, those who swore to protect the kings even in death. Eldrin's skin prickles. The swords aren't just relics. They're warnings. The moment Eldrin crosses the threshold into the cavern, the whispers begin, not from the walls or the flickering blue flames, but from the air itself. They curl around his ears like tendrils of smoke, voices murmuring in a tongue that prickles at the edges of his memory, words half-formed, syllables that sound like wind through ruins. Thalian's hand tightens on his staff, his knuckles whitening. Listen, he breathes, not with your ears, with your bones. Eldrin closes his eyes, and suddenly, the whispers sharpen. They're not random, not echoes, they are a chorus, layered and urgent. King's voices, worn thin by time, but thrumming with a resonance that makes his teeth ache. Thalian's translation comes in fragments, his own voice strained as if the words are being pulled from him against his will. They speak of a storm, not of wind or rain, but of shadow. It gathers in the east, where the stars go quiet. A pause, then tighter. It seeks the light, all light, especially the kind that dares to wake. Eldrin's eyes snap open. The blue flames gutter, casting jagged shadows that twist like living things. The sleeping kings aren't just resting, they're hiding, and whatever hunts them isn't merely a force. It's a will, something that remembers the taste of their defiance. Thalian's gaze locks onto his, unblinking. There's a way to rouse them, the Horn of Dawn, forgotten, but not lost. The name sends a shiver down Eldrin's spine. He's heard it before, in the half-remembered verses of his grandfather's stories. A relic said to be carved from the first light of the world, its sound capable of piercing even the deepest slumber. But legends are rarely kind with details. Where, Eldrin asks, his voice rough. Thalian's answer is barely audible, where all things of power go to be forgotten. The Vault of the Vanished, a place Eldrin knows only from tavern tales. A labyrinth beneath the misty mountains, where treasures and terrors alike are swallowed by the earth. The king's whispers surge again, frantic now, their fear a living thing in the air. They don't plead, they warn, because the horn isn't just a key, it's a beacon. And the moment it sounds, every shadow in Middle-earth will turn its hungry gaze toward the one who dared to wake the light. The cavern seems to hold its breath. Even the blue flames still, their light thickening like syrup. Eldrin looks down at his hands, calloused and ordinary, and wonders how they could possibly carry something so vast. But then the whispers shift one last time, not in his ears but in his chest, a single word, clear as a strike of steel. Run, not from the task, from the doubt. Because the storm is coming, and the only choice left is whether to face it with eyes open or die blinking. The blue flames gutter as Eldrin and Thalian step deeper into the cavern, their light shrinking back like wary sentinels. And there, atop a slab of obsidian, so dark it seems to swallow the air around it, rests the Horn of Dawn, its surface etched with runes that glow faintly, as if echoing a heartbeat. But between them and the relic stands the Guardian, not a man, not a ghost, but something in between, clad in armor that might have once been silver, but now gleams like tarnished moonlight. The figure towers over them, its hollow-eyed helm fixed on Eldrin. No breath stirs the tattered cloak at its back. No hand grips the sword at its side, because the blade isn't sheathed. It's fused to the Guardian's very bones, jagged and rusted, where it juts from the creature's ribs. This isn't just a warrior, it's a warning. Thalian goes rigid. Don't move, he whispers. It doesn't see with eyes, it sees with what you carry. Eldrin's throat tightens as the Guardian's head tilts, that hollow gaze boring into him. Then it speaks not with a voice, but with the scrape of steel on stone, the sound vibrating in Eldrin's teeth. You seek the horn, the words aren't a question. They're an indictment. To wake kings is to wake the storm. Are you their shield or their doom? The cavern warps around them, the walls dissolving into a whirl of shadow and memory. Suddenly, Eldrin isn't standing on stone, but on a battlefield drenched in twilight, the air thick with the stench of iron and burning flesh. The Guardian looms before him, but now its armor is whole, its cloak the crimson of fresh blood. Show me, it commands, the weight of your purpose, and the visions come, not of imagined horrors, but of truths Eldrin has buried. The night he fled his village, leaving his brother to face the raiders alone. The promises he broke, the trust he squandered, every flicker of cowardice he's dressed up as pragmatism. They spill out of him like poison from a wound, each memory given form by the Guardian's will. The creature doesn't judge, it simply watches, that terrible silence more crushing than any accusation. Then, amidst the wreckage of his regrets, a single image flares brighter. The face of his grandfather, not as he last saw him, frail and fading, but as he was in Eldrin's boyhood. Kneeling in the dirt to show him how to plant acorns. Even the mightiest oaks, the old man had said, begin as something small, something willing to split itself open in the dark. The battlefield shatters. Eldrin staggers back, gasping, as the cavern snaps into focus around him. The Guardian hasn't moved, but its sword arm trembles, the rusted blade groaning as if straining against some invisible chain. You carry doubt, it rasps, but also a seed. Thalian's staff strikes the ground, the sound like a thunderclap in the close air. Enough, he snarls, the boy's been tested. Let him pass. For a heartbeat, nothing happens. Then, with a sound like a sigh woven from centuries of dust, the Guardian steps aside. Its cloak brushes Eldrin's arm as he moves toward the altar. Not cold, but fever-hot, as if the creature's very essence burns with unfinished business. The horn waits, its surface smooth under his trembling fingers. But as he lifts it, the Guardian's final whisper follows him, clinging like a scar. Remember, little sapling. Even oaks can fall. The moment the horn leaves the altar, the blue flames snuff out, and in the sudden, suffocating dark, something far below the cavern begins to stir. The weight of the horn in Eldrin's hands feels neither heavy nor light. It hums with a presence, as if the relic itself is alive, vibrating with the memory of 1,000 sunrises. His fingers tighten around it, the runes pulsing faintly against his skin, like a distant drumbeat. The Guardian watches motionless, but the air between them crackles with something unspoken. Eldrin doesn't flinch. He meets the hollow gaze of that ancient helm, and for the first time, his voice doesn't waver. My people have bled under shadows too long, he says, each word deliberate, forged in the fires of every loss he's carried. We've buried our dead in silence, whispered our hopes into the wind, because the world taught us to fear the light. But I've seen the truth in my grandfather's stories, not just the glory of kings, but their scars. Their failures, they weren't legends. They were men who chose to stand when standing cost them everything. The cavern seems to hold its breath. Even the whispers of the sleeping kings fade, as if leaning closer to listen. Eldrin's next words aren't a plea or a boast. They are a promise, raw and unshaped, like the first spark struck from flint. I don't ask for their strength, only the chance to prove my own. For a heartbeat, nothing moves. Then the Guardian's rusted blade shudders, a sound like ice splitting in spring, and the creature steps back. Not in defeat, in recognition. Its voice, when it comes, is softer now, woven with something almost like regret. You carry their fire, it murmurs, but fire burns both ways. Eldrin doesn't have time to answer. The moment the horn lifts clear of the altar, the ground beneath his feet convulses. Stones shift and groan. Dust cascades from the ceiling like a second sky falling. Thalian grabs his arm, yanking him backward as the obsidian slab cracks down the middle. revealing a yawning blackness beneath. The kings stir, the wanderer hisses, his eyes wide with something between awe and terror. And the storm wakes with them. From the depths, a sound rises, not a roar, not a scream, but a sigh so vast it seems to come from the earth itself. The shadows at the edges of the cavern writhe, thickening into shapes too fleeting to name, but too sharp to ignore. Eldrin's pulse hammers in his throat, but his grip on the horn never falters. The time for hiding is over. Somewhere in the dark heart of Middle-earth, a door has opened. And the world holds its breath to see what walks through. The wind outside the ruins howls like a living thing, tearing at the trees as if trying to uproot the very memory of this place. Eldrin knows, without needing to be told, that the Guardian's trial was only the beginning. The real test lies ahead, not in proving his worth, but in surviving what comes next. Because legends aren't just about waking kings. They're about becoming the kind of man who can face what wakes with them. Thalian's hand closes over his, guiding the horn to his lips. The old man's fingers are trembling, but his voice is steady. "Sound it," he says, "and don't look back." The first note tears through the night like a blade through silk, clear, bright, and terrible in its beauty. It doesn't echo. It multiplies, rippling outward in waves that make the stars themselves seem to shudder. And far below, in the dark where even shadows fear to tread, something answers. The note from the horn doesn't fade. It deepens, spiraling outward in widening rings that shudder through stone and soil. Eldrin feels it in his ribs, in the roots of his teeth, as if the sound isn't just traveling through the air, but rewriting the very fabric of the world around him. The ruins tremble, dust cascading from the ceiling like a second rain, and then silence, a breath held too long. Then the earth answers. A groan rises from the depths, slow and colossal, the sound of mountains shifting in their sleep. The ground beneath Eldrin's boots cracks open in jagged seams, blue light bleeding through like dawn through storm clouds. Thalian staggers back, his staff raised, but his eyes are wide with something beyond fear. Awe, because the light isn't fire or magic. It's the glow of armored forms rising from the darkness, their breastplates etched with sigils forgotten for ages. The sleeping kings don't walk. They float, suspended in the air, as if the earth itself refuses to let them go. Their faces are hidden beneath helms of tarnished silver, but their presence is a weight, a pressure against Eldrin's skin like the air before a lightning strike. One king drifts forward, taller than the rest, his cloak billowing though no wind stirs the cavern. When he speaks, his voice is the scrape of a tomb door opening after centuries. Who dares? The words aren't a question. They're a blade held to Eldrin's throat. But before he can answer, the shadows at the edges of the cavern twist. A new sound slithers through the cracks in the floor. Not the horn's clear call, not the king's resonant voices, but a whisper that curls like smoke, hungry and cold. Thalian's hand clamps onto Eldrin's shoulder. The shadow watchers. He breathes. No worse. The blue light dims as something vast and shapeless pours into the cavern, not through the door, but through the walls themselves, as if stone is no barrier to it. The kings turn as one, their weapons flashing into spectral hands, but the darkness doesn't attack. It coils around them, tendrils probing, testing, and then it laughs. A sound like ice cracking over a frozen lake. You woke them, it murmurs, the voice slithering into Eldrin's mind. But who will wake you when the night comes? The tallest king raises his sword, and the cavern erupts in light and fury. But Eldrin sees the truth in the split second before the clash. The kings aren't just fighting the shadow. They're straining against something deeper, something that claws at them from within. The horn didn't just wake them. It woke the thing that's been gnawing at their bones all these long years. And now it's free. Thalian's breath catches in his throat as the darkness coils tighter, its edges fraying into tendrils that lick at the edges of the king's light. The Nameless One, he whispers, the words crumbling like ash in his mouth. Eldrin feels the truth of it before the name even registers. The way the cavern's air turns thick and sour, the way the blue flames gutter as if snuffed by an unseen hand. This isn't just some lingering shadow. This is the hunger that gnawed at the edges of the old world, the reason the kings chose to sleep rather than fade. The tallest king turns his hollow gaze toward Eldrin, and for the first time, there's something like recognition in that ancient face. You, his voice rashes through the chamber like wind through dead leaves. You have opened the door. The accusation isn't sharp, it's weary, as if this moment was always waiting at the end of every path Eldrin could have walked. And then the darkness laughs. It's not a sound so much as a vibration, something that slithers up from the cracks in the floor and settles in Eldrin's bones. The king's light dims, their spectral armor flickering like candle flames in a storm. Thalian's staff flares white-hot, but the old man's hands shake. Not from fear, Eldrin realizes, but strain. As if he's holding back something vast with nothing but his own fraying will. It was never just about waking them, Thalian grits out. It was about waking them first. The truth crashes over Eldrin like a wave. The horn wasn't a key, it was a gambit, a way to tip the scales before the Nameless One could finish what it started centuries ago. But the cost of losing that race now stares him in the face. The king's form shuddering, their light leaching away into the grasping dark. The tallest king's sword wavers, its edge dulling as veins of black crawl up the blade like creeping frost. Eldrin's fingers tighten around the horn. It's still warm in his grip, pulsing faintly, as if the last echo of its call still lingers, and that's when he sees it. The barest thread of gold woven through the darkness, thin as spider silk but unbroken. The kings aren't just fighting the Nameless One, they're tethered to it, bound by the same oaths that once sealed them away. To destroy one is to unravel the other. Thalian meets his eyes, and in that look, Eldrin finds no blame, only a terrible, quiet resolve. Some choices, the old man murmurs, aren't about winning. They're about choosing how you lose. The darkness surges forward, and the kings raise their swords not in attack, but in salute, to Eldrin, to the horn, to the fragile, foolish hope that brought them here. The tallest king's voice cuts through the chaos, clear and final. Then let us wake the world one last time. The horn's second note shatters the air, brighter than dawn, sharper than steel. And this time, Eldrin doesn't just hear it, he becomes it. The sound rips through him, through the kings, through the very roots of the mountain, not a call to arms, but a farewell. A release. The Nameless One screams as the king's light erupts, not in defiance, but in surrender. They burn like dying stars, their radiance searing the darkness away inch by terrible inch. It's not victory, it's a pyre, and as the last of the king's forms dissolve into the air, their whispers linger, not in Eldrin's ears, but in the sudden, aching silence they leave behind. Remember us. The cavern is empty now. No kings, no darkness. Only Eldrin, Thalian, and the horn cold and silent in Eldrin's hands. Its runes faded to gray. Outside, the wind howls through the ruins, but it sounds different. Not triumphant, not defeated, just changed. Thalian's hand finds Eldrin's shoulder, his grip firm. It's done, he says, but the look in his eyes says something else entirely. It's just begun. The ground heaves beneath Eldrin's boots as the first fissure cracks open, swallowing chunks of the cavern wall whole. Thalian's shout is lost in the roar of splitting stone, but his grip on Eldrin's arm is iron, yanking him sideways, just as the slab where he'd stood collapses into the abyss. Dust billows in choking waves, stinging their eyes, but through the haze, shapes move. Tall, armored, their silhouettes backlit by an eerie glow that pulses from within the earth itself. The kings don't run, they stride, their movements synchronized like a single tide, breaking against the shore. Eldrin stumbles, his lungs burning, but Thalian drags him forward. Don't look back, the old man gasps, though the warning is unnecessary. The air behind them thickens with something worse than dust, a presence that presses against Eldrin's spine like a blade's edge. The Nameless One doesn't chase. It unfolds, tendrils of darkness, seeping through the ruins like ink through parchment, dissolving stone where it passes. A king steps into their path, his armor cracked but gleaming, his eyes 2 points of blue fire beneath his helm. For a heartbeat, Eldrin braces for a blow, but the warrior merely turns, raising his sword toward the crumbling ceiling. The blade ignites white hot, carving a path through the falling debris. A silent command, go. They sprint, lungs searing, as the ruins dissolve into chaos around them. Pillars topple, archways groan and snap like bone. Eldrin risks one glance back, just in time to see the kings form a circle, their weapons raised not against the collapsing mountain, but against the thing slithering up from the cracks. The Nameless One laughs again, that soundless, gut-deep vibration, and the nearest king's armor blackens, as if scorched from within. Thalian veers sharply left, pulling Eldrin into a narrow passage half buried by rubble. The walls here hum with residual energy, the stones warm to the touch, vibrating with the echoes of the horn's call. They're buying us time, the old man rasps, his voice raw. But time's a currency that runs out fast in places like this. The tunnel spits them out onto a ledge high above the valley, the wind howling like a chorus of lost voices. Below, the ruins convulse, great plumes of dust rising as the mountain devours itself. But it's not just stone falling, it's the kings, one by one, their lights flicker and dim, swallowed by the spreading dark. Yet as each vanishes, a pulse of radiance bursts upward, stitching the sky with threads of gold. Not defeat, a beacon. Thalian's fingers dig into Eldrin's shoulder. They are not just holding it back, he murmurs, awe cracking his voice. They're rewriting the rules. The last king stands alone now, his sword raised high, his form blazing like a star, shoved into the heart of the earth. For a moment, the darkness recoils, and in that breath, that sliver of light, Eldrin sees the truth. This was never about survival. It was about sacrifice. The king's voice, when it comes, is a whisper carried on the wind. Tell them we remembered. Then the mountain erupts, not in fire, not in shadow, but in light pure and blinding. A column of radiance punching through the clouds, scattering the night like embers from a forge. The force of it knocks Eldrin to his knees, the horn tumbling from his grip, its runes dark and silent. When the glare fades, the valley below is still. No ruins, no kings, no darkness, only the wind, scouring the earth clean, and the terrible, ringing silence of a world holding its breath. Thalian retrieves the horn, his hands trembling. It's lighter now, hollow, as if whatever lived inside it has flown. It's done, he says again, but his eyes are on the horizon, where the first pale streaks of dawn press against the night. Or it's just begun. The glade is silent at first, not the quiet of emptiness, but the hush of held breath. Eldrin feels it before he sees them, figures emerging from the tree line like shadows given form. Rangers with bows strapped to their backs, their cloaks threaded with leaves, scholars clutching frayed scrolls, ink-stained fingers trembling, warriors in dented armor, their blades notched from battles no one else remembers. They step into the moonlight one by one, drawn not by the horn in Eldrin's hands, but by the echo of its call, still humming in their bones. A woman steps forward first, her face lined with scars and something heavier recognition. You woke them, she says, her voice rough as tree bark. The kings, the light. Her name is Lyra, a captain of the scattered Dunedain, and when she touches the hilt of her sword, the others tense, waiting. Eldrin expects accusation, but her eyes flicker with something fiercer, hope. The horn's sound reached us in the deep woods. Farther, even, the dwarves of the Iron Hills felt it. The elves of Linden heard it whisper through their dream songs. She gestures to a hooded figure behind her, a silver-haired scholar whose hands are bound in bandages, as if he's been burning them on words too hot to hold. He's spent 3 lifetimes translating the Black Scrolls. They speak of this of you. The scholar unfurls a map, its edges singed, its ink glowing faintly like embers. The Nameless One isn't just rising, he murmurs. It's remembering. Every king it devoured, every light it snuffed out, their strength feeds it now. His finger traces a path to a mountain range jagged as broken teeth. Here, the gap of Rohan, where the last armies of men made their stand, where the earth still bleeds. A murmur ripples through the glade. A broad-shouldered warrior with a missing ear snarls. So we die there instead of here. Fine, but don't dress it up as victory. Thalian's staff strikes the ground, a sound like a cracking bone. You misunderstand, he says, quieter than the wind but sharp enough to cut. This isn't about dying well. It's about choosing how the light falls. His gaze finds Eldrin's, and suddenly, the weight of the horn feels different, not a burden, but a needle threading them all together. The kings bought us time, not with their lives, but with their memories. The Nameless One fears nothing, except being forgotten. Lyra's fingers tighten around her sword. Then we remind it, she says, not a plea, a vow. One by one, the others step forward. A dwarf with a hammer blackened by dragon fire. An elf whose eyes hold the chill of winters beyond counting. Farmers with pitchforks, healers with vials of starlight, thieves with hands quick enough to steal shadows. They don't kneel, they don't swear oaths. They simply stand, their breaths misting in the cold air. And in that silence, Eldrin hears the truth. This isn't an army, it's a reckoning. The scholar rolls up his map, the glow fading. The horn can't be used again, he warns. not to wake, to warn. His bandaged hand brushes the relic, and for a heartbeat, the runes flare. Not gold, but red. Sounded at the gap, and every soul who ever fought the shadow will hear, even the ones who lost. Eldrin looks down at the horn. It's lighter now, hollowed out by its own power, but the weight of what comes next settles into his shoulders like armor. They're not waiting for a leader, they're waiting for a spark. The first snowflake kisses his cheek as he turns toward the east. Behind him, footsteps fall into rhythm, not marching, but walking. As if they've always been going this way, as if the road remembered them before they even took the first step. The horizon bleeds black as the Nameless One's shadow unfurls across the land, swallowing the last streaks of dawn like a stain spreading through parchment. Trees shudder and crack, their leaves crumbling to ash before they even touch the ground. The air itself curdles, thick with the scent of rust and rotting petals, humming with whispers that slither into ears and nestle behind eyes. Eldrin staggers under the weight of it, his vision swimming with half-formed shapes, skeletal hands clawing at the edges of reality, mouths stretched wide in silent screams. This isn't just darkness, it's the absence that comes after light has been devoured. Lyra grips his arm, her fingers icy even through his sleeve. It's faster than we thought, she breathes, her voice fraying at the edges. Behind her, the ragged fellowship clusters closer, weapons gleaming dully under the sickly sky. The dwarf's knuckles whiten around his hammer, the elf's song dies in her throat. Even Thalian, who faced the cavern's horrors without flinching, now stands rigid, his staff trembling like a compass needle caught in a storm. A sound rolls across the land, not a roar, not thunder, but the groan of something vast waking from a nightmare. The earth shudders in answer, fissures splitting open like wounds, each one oozing a viscous black mist that coils upward, forming shapes too fleeting to name, but too terrible to forget. Eldrin's pulse hammers against his ribs, but it's the horn at his side that burns coldest, its runes flickering as if trying to remember their own light. We can't outrun it, mutters the silver-haired scholar, his bandaged hands clutching the glowing map. And we can't outfight it, not like this. His eyes dart to Eldrin, sharp with a realization that tastes like gall. The king's bought us time, but time's a currency it feeds on. Then comes the whisper, not from the shadows, not from the air, from inside, a voice like splintered glass, sliding between Eldrin's thoughts. You woke them too late, little spark. Their fire was always meant to be kindling. The words aren't just a taunt, they're a key, twisting in a lock Eldrin didn't know he carried. Suddenly, he understands the true cost of the horn's call. The sleeping kings weren't just warriors. They were vessels, each one a prison for fragments of the Nameless One's own power, sealed away when the world was young. And now, with their sacrifice, those fragments have returned to the whole. Lyra's sword flashes as she slices through a tendril of mist that slithers too close. Then we don't fight the darkness, she snarls. We fight where it's thin. The scholar's map trembles in the wind, its glowing lines converging on the gap of Rohan, where the land itself still screams from ancient battles. Where the veil between worlds is tissue thin, where the last kings fell, not in defeat, but in a gambit so desperate, even the Nameless One couldn't unravel it fully. Thalian's laugh is a dry, broken thing. Clever girl, he murmurs. You're thinking like the dwarves of old, not breaking the mountain, using it. Eldrin's hand finds the horn, its weight suddenly different, not a weapon, but a lodestone. The runes aren't just fading, they're changing, twisting into new shapes under his fingers like roots, seeking water. The second note wasn't meant to wake kings. It was meant to wake the earth, and the earth remembers hunger. The earth trembles not from fear, but recognition, as the first king steps from the mist. His armor isn't tarnished by time, it's forged by it, every dent and scratch a battle hymn etched in steel. When he lifts his visor, the face beneath is neither young nor old, but endless, eyes like embers in a forge. The wind stills as his voice rolls across the valley, deep as roots grinding stone. You rang the horn, little ember, but do you know whose fire you've stoked? Behind him, shapes resolve from the gloom, figures wrapped in dawn's last light, their cloaks threaded with forgotten constellations. A king with a crown of antler and iron. A queen whose braids are woven with river pearls, her sword singing a dirge only the mountains remember. They don't walk, they manifest, as if the world itself is remembering them stitch by stitch. The first king's gauntleted hand closes over Eldrin's shoulder, and suddenly, the boy isn't standing on grass, but on a battlefield drenched in centuries-old rain. The vision lasts only a heartbeat, smoke, screaming horses, a banner of red and gold snapping in a gale. But the message is clear. This isn't their first war. And it won't be their last. The antler-crowned king steps forward, his breath smelling of pine resin and buried copper. We slept, he murmurs, but our dreams were knives. His fingers brush the horn at Eldrin's belt, and the relic shivers, its runes flaring crimson. You didn't wake us to fight shadows, you woke us to remind them. A murmur ripples through the gathered kings. The queen with the pearl-strung braids unsheathes her blade, and the metal doesn't gleam. It drinks the light, leaving after-images of void in its wake. They think us relics, she says, her voice the crisp edge of a winter moon. But relics don't bleed, and we, her smile is a sickle, we remember how. The ground quakes again, but this time, it's not the Nameless One's doing. The king's armor pulses in unison, a slow, rhythmic throb, like a drum line buried deep in the earth. With each beat, the fissures in the soil knit themselves closed, the corrupted mist recoiling as if scalded. The first king turns his face to the east, where the horizon is bruising black. It's coming, he says simply, then to Eldrin, but so are we, and then impossibly they laugh, a sound like avalanches and breaking chains, so fierce it scatters the crows from the trees. Because these aren't just warriors risen from dust. They are the punchline to a joke the darkness forgot it told, and they've never lost their taste for irony. The air shatters with the sound of 1,000 blades unsheathed at once, a metallic scream that drowns even the thunder of the splitting earth. The Nameless One's minions pour from the fissures like ink, from a cracked vial, their forms shifting between wolf and wraith, between armored knights and things with too many teeth. Eldrin's breath sticks in his throat, but the kings don't flinch. The antler-crowned one lifts his spear, and the valley answers. Roots erupt from the soil, tangling around shadowy limbs. Boulders groan and roll of their own accord, crushing the advance. This isn't just war, it's the land itself choosing sides. A tendril of darkness lashes toward Eldrin, faster than thought, but the pearl-braided queen steps in its path. Her sword moves like water, severing the tendril mid-lash. The severed end writhes on the ground, hissing, before dissolving into smoke. She doesn't look back at Eldrin, but her voice cuts through the chaos. You carry the horn, but courage isn't in your hands. It's in your feet. Stand or step, but don't waver. The ground bucks violently as the Nameless One's true form begins to rise. A spire of swirling void, its edges fraying into countless grasping hands. The kings brace, their armor glowing brighter, but Eldrin sees the truth in the flicker of their light. They're holding back something far worse than shadows. They're holding back time. Every second, the Nameless One is here. It's unraveling the threads of history, bleaching color from the grass, stealing the warmth from the sun itself. Lyra's arrow finds a wraith's throat, but the creature doesn't fall. It laughs, a sound like glass grinding on bone, and keeps coming. The silver-haired scholar shouts a warning, old words, half remembered, and the wraith stumbles, its form flickering. It's not their bodies you need to break, he gasps. It's their stories. Eldrin's fingers tighten around the horn, not to sound it, to remember. His grandfather's voice murmurs in his ear, not as memory, but as marrow-deep knowing. The darkest things fear neither sword nor spell. They fear being named, so he does. He steps forward, past the kings, past the queen's outstretched arm, and shouts a name into the maelstrom. Not the Nameless One's true name, no mortal tongue could bear it, but the name of the first king who fell to it. The name of the village it consumed, the names of the children who hid under the floorboards and lived to whisper the tale. The darkness recoils, not from pain, but from recognition. The antler-crowned king roars in triumph, not at Eldrin, but with him. That's it, little ember, burn their memories clean. The battle tips. The scholars chant fragments of old treaties. The warriors carve sigils into the air with their blades. Even the earth fights back, grass blades sharpening like knives, winds howling with the voices of long-dead scouts. And through it all, Eldrin realizes the truth. This was never about winning. It was about refusing to let the darkness forget what it cost to taste the light. The Nameless One shrieks, a sound that cracks the sky, but its retreat isn't defeat. It's calculation. The kings know it. Their light dims as they form a circle, not around Eldrin, but around the horn at his belt. The first king meets his eyes, and for the first time, there's exhaustion in that ancient gaze. It's learning, he growls. Next time, it'll come for the stories first. The queen sheathes her sword with a sigh like a closing tomb. Then we write new ones. The ground splits beneath Eldrin's feet, as the Nameless One rises not a shape, but an absence, a hole in the world where light goes to die. Its form flickers between a dozen nightmares, a wolf with too many eyes, a knight with a hollow helm, a storm cloud writhing with half-formed faces. The horn trembles in Eldrin's grip, its runes blazing white-hot, searing his palms. He doesn't sound it. He doesn't need to. The king's voices are already there, woven into the wind, into his breath, into the hammering of his heart. The antler-crowned king steps forward, his spear dripping liquid light. You fed on our silence, he snarls at the void. Now choke on our song. The horn's note shatters the air. Not a single tone, but a chorus. The king's voices rise through Eldrin, their memories flooding his blood. A child's laughter in a burning village, a soldier's last oath whispered into his brother's ear, a queen's hands planting seeds in salted earth. Every moment the Nameless One tried to erase, every light it thought it had devoured, comes roaring back. The darkness shudders, its edges fraying like rotten cloth. The pearl-braided queen lunges, her sword carving a line of fire across the void. "You forgot," she hisses. "We are not just what we lost. We are what we chose to keep." The Nameless One screams, a sound that cracks the sky, but the kings don't flinch. Their light isn't a weapon, it's a reckoning. Eldrin feels it in his bones, the weight of centuries pressing against the shadow, not to destroy it, but to remake it. To force it to remember what it was before the hunger, a fragment of something older, something that once knew the warmth of the sun. The ground heaves. The horn's song swells, and then silence. The void collapses inward, folding like paper tossed into a flame, leaving only a whisper of smoke and the scent of rain on fresh-turned soil. The king's forms flicker, their armor translucent as morning mist. The antlered one clasps Eldrin's shoulder, his touch light as a falling leaf. "The horn is spent," he murmurs. But the song isn't over. One by one, they fade not as warriors falling, but as embers returning to the hearth. The last to go is the queen. She presses her palm to Eldrin's chest, her fingers cool as moonlight. "Tell them," she says, and then she too is gone. The wind carries the scent of blooming thistle, of damp earth after a long drought. The horn, now dull and lifeless, slips from Eldrin's fingers. It doesn't clatter, it doesn't break. It simply rests there, a vessel emptied of everything except the echo of what it once held. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sings. The first one he's heard in days. The first rays of dawn spill across the battlefield like molten gold, painting the broken earth in hues of amber and rose. The air, once thick with the stench of iron and shadow, now carries the crisp sweetness of dew-laden grass. The awakened kings stand in a semicircle around Eldrin, their armor no longer spectral, but solid under the new sun, etched with scars that gleam like badges of honor. The antler-crowned king is the first to kneel, his spear planted firmly in the earth, its tip catching the light like a beacon. Herald of the dawn, he murmurs, his voice a rumble of distant thunder. The others follow, knees bending, helms dipping until Eldrin stands alone, the weight of their reverence pressing against his chest like a second heartbeat. The land itself seems to sigh in relief. Cracks in the soil knit themselves closed, tendrils of fresh green weaving through the scorched earth. Trees that had stood gnarled and lifeless now tremble, their branches stretching toward the sky as if shaking off a long sleep. Even the wind changes, carrying not whispers of dread, but the faint, lilting notes of a melody half remembered, a song the world hadn't dared to sing in centuries. Yet amidst the healing, Eldrin feels it, a prickle at the base of his skull, the faintest tremor beneath his boots. The Nameless One is gone, but the void it left behind is not empty. Shadows have a way of pooling in forgotten corners, of seeping through the cracks of complacency. The pearl-braided queen rises, her sword still gleaming, and meets his gaze. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. The warning is in the way her fingers tighten around her hilt, in the flicker of her eyes toward the eastern horizon, where the mountains crouch like sleeping giants. Lyra steps forward, her bow slung across her back, her face streaked with dirt and dried blood. "What now?" she asks, her voice rough but steady. The question hangs in the air, heavier than it should be. Around them, the fellowship gathers rangers with quivers half empty. scholars clutching tattered scrolls, warriors leaning on notched blades. They don't cheer. They don't celebrate. They wait, their eyes fixed on Eldrin, not for answers, but for direction. Thalian's staff taps lightly against the earth, drawing Eldrin's attention. The old wanderer's face is lined with exhaustion, but his eyes are bright, sharp as flint. Dawn doesn't mean the night won't return, he says quietly. It means we've been given time to prepare. Eldrin bends to retrieve the horn from where it lies, its runes faded but not gone. The metal is cool against his palm, no longer humming with power, but with something quieter. A promise, perhaps, or a reminder. He slips it into his belt and turns to face the rising sun. The light warms his skin, chases the lingering chill from his bones, but the warmth doesn't settle. It stirs restless, like embers waiting for a breath to reignite. Somewhere, beyond the mended fields and the singing trees, beyond the mountains and the mist, other shadows stir. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but Eldrin knows deep in the marrow of him that this is not an ending. It's a vigil, and the herald of the dawn does not close his eyes. The first light of dawn spills over the ridge like liquid gold, gilding the edges of Eldrin's cloak and the tired lines of his face. He breathes deep, not the damp, metallic air of caverns or the acrid sting of battle, but clean wind, scented with pine and the faintest hint of wild thyme. Below, the valley stirs, campfires flicker to life, voices hum in quiet conversation, and somewhere, a child laughs, a sound so ordinary it aches. The horn hangs at his belt, silent now, its runes dulled but not forgotten. It feels lighter than it should, as if its true weight wasn't in the metal, but in the choices it demanded. A rustle of fabric, beside him Thalian, leaning on his staff, his eyes reflecting the sunrise. The old wanderer doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The lines etched into his face say enough. The cost, the quiet triumph, the knowing that peace is never a destination, only a pause between storms. Eldrin flexes his fingers, still sore from gripping swords and talismans, and the hands of dying friends. The scars are new, but the lessons beneath them feel ancient, whispered into his bones by kings who wore their own scars like crowns. The wind shifts, carrying voices from the camp. Lyra barking orders, the scholars' dry chuckle, the dwarfs' rumbling toast. They should feel like strangers. Instead, they sound like the first notes of a song he's been hearing all his life, without knowing the words. The antler-crowned king's last words drift back to him. Stories don't end when the fighting stops. They begin when someone chooses to tell them. A bird trills overhead, bold and bright against the quiet. Eldrin closes his eyes, letting the sun warm his skin. Somewhere, shadows gather, in mountain passes, in the hollows of forgotten ruins, in the spaces between heartbeats. But here now there is light, and for the first time he understands. Waking the kings wasn't about bringing back the past. It was about learning how to carry it forward. Thalian exhales long and slow and claps a hand on Eldrin's shoulder. Breakfast, he grunts, nodding toward the camp. Simple, practical, unremarkable, and somehow that's the most remarkable thing of all. Eldrin follows, his boots scuffing the dew-kissed grass. Behind him, the sunrise stretches its fingers across the land, painting the world in colors too vivid for legends. The road ahead is long, but for now, there's hot food, good company, and the quiet certainty that whatever comes next, he won't face it alone. Somewhere in the distance, a lark sings. The wind answers, and their story takes its first true breath.